Welcome back, Dolphins. Today we're going to be discussing who I think it's going to be 4 breakout players coming into the offseason. I truly do believe that these guys, are being slept on. And I think, of course, because a lot of our fan base, I think it was like a stat of like 70% of our fan base is like negative about basically everything. Most of our fans are very negative, and it's like Dolphins are going to have 1 win this season. And I think there's going to be a couple players that you're going to be surprised about coming into the offseason. And I think these players are really going to take that next step. Of course, we'll go over the rookies eventually before rookie minicamp that I think will start having a breakout year. I think the top rookies. But these are going to be the players on the Dolphins right now that I think are going to really jump this offseason and really finally become what they were drafted to be. So we'll get into it. So here, as you can see, Jaylen Wright, I want to really talk about him because I think a lot of people are sleeping on what this dude can do. I love Devon Achane. I really do. I think he's a great player. I just think the limitations that you have with Devon Achane are going to be, they were kind of relevant last year, where you can see that you're trying to run a scat back between the tackles and the guards. Just not going to work. So when you look at Jaylen Wright, the thing that I think people underestimate is he's 5'10", 5'11", 210. Devon Achane ran, I think it was a 4.32, if I'm not mistaken, or 4.33 when he was in the draft. Jaylen Wright ran a 4.38. So almost equally as fast, except 20 pounds bigger than Devon Achane. And I want us to take a look at a certain metric right here. It was this game. New England was the game that Austin Jackson went down. And as you can see, we started implementing Jaylen Wright in that game. Honestly, look at the snap count. You have obviously 6 for the first couple weeks. I don't know why it's not showing week 1. What's going on here? Why is it not showing week 1? All right. I don't know why it's doing that. Jacksonville, I don't think he had any stats. Maybe that's not why it's not showing. So Buffalo, he had a couple of carries, for 4 yards. It was like, all right, didn't really see much. Seattle, he had 2 carries for 17. Still 8 yards per attempt, was pretty decent. Then he had 10 snaps. 9 for 32 against Tennessee, which that game was atrocious. It was a complete debacle. And then you see New England, and it was kind of a little bit of a breakout party for him. 13 attempts, 86 yards. And it was a 6.6 yards per average. And this was the game that Austin Jackson went down. And as you can see, we played Indy. He did decent. He had some carries. You only gave him 5 afterwards because, again, you wanted to put Devon Achane out there. And then you had a pretty decent run against Arizona, if you remember correctly. He broke a couple tackles. This was like first carry went for nothing, and then the second carry went for like 18 yards. Didn't do anything again, or they didn't let him do anything again. And then, as you can see, it was a slow burner for afterwards. He just couldn't get anything going. And a lot of the time, running backs have to have a good offensive line. If they're getting hit in the backfield, there's that you could do, and that's what was happening to Jaylen Wright the entire year. He was getting hit right in the backfield. It was happening to Devon Achane. It was happening to every single running back that we had on the field because the offensive line could not block. You were running under Liam Eichenberg, and Jackson Carman. Just couldn't get anything going. But as you can see, a lot of the pass blocking grades are very good for him because that was something that was decent of him coming out of the draft. So as a breakout, I think just purely on the merit of Devon Achane's 190 pounds. He's very explosive, but he's 190 pounds. So there's limitations with that. You can't sit there and run him through the tackles. You can't sit there. You have to do screens and, tosses to get him on the outside so that he can use his speed. But the issue with that is that people then know it's coming. And, a lot of people are going to try and maybe defend him for going up the middle. Of course, you can run him up the middle, but he's going to have a NFL life of like 4 years if you're running a dude that small up the middle. He can't take that type of punishment, and he's been injured every year that we've had him, and that's the reason why we drafted Jaylen Wright. It was, best player available, and he was coming out of the draft. There was an argue about who was the best running back in this year's draft, and it was, the guy from the Panthers who tore his ACL from Texas. It was, not the Falcons. What's another red team? I know he was on a red team. Was it the Cardinals, the guy in the Cardinals, and it was Jaylen Wright. And, the guy in the Cardinals kind of sucks. Panthers guy, Chuba Hubbard, looks to taking that role. And it was Jaylen Wright. That was the conversation for the top 3 running backs coming out in the draft. And the reason they drafted Jaylen Wright is because they see that Devon Achane cannot take that beating all the time. It's just not going to be feasible for him to do that. So you get a dude that's 5'11", 5'10", and can run like this, against a New England defense that is very stout. And like I said, Austin Jackson went down, and it was just a completely different team afterwards. We just didn't have the same blocking. We didn't have the same ability to do basically anything until Tua came back, because everybody was just, at this point, again, Austin Jackson went down, and Tua was not there. So our passers could not do. They were inept. They were horrid, and you couldn't really block, and they knew you weren't really going to pass, so they just stacked the box with 7 and just said, try and run on us, but, we want you to pass. That's what the whole thing was for all the way up until the Arizona game. They were like, we want you to pass. And Jaylen Wright kind of filled that role a little bit. He was making some plays, and then, like I said, Austin Jackson went down, and it was just a struggle bus city after that. But, when Tua was out, Jaylen Wright was doing his thing. And I think, honestly, we have Ollie Gordon. I think Ollie Gordon's going to take a lot of the goal line snaps. But I do think it's going to be a breakout year for Jaylen Wright, just based on the fact that he's going to be the more long-term kind of prototypical running back. He just has more traits, than Devon Achane is like kind of like a receiver back, like a H back or like a scat back where you just send him all over the place. Jaylen Wright's more of the prototypical running back that you can, basically line him up in the I formation and just run him up the gut, and he's going to get you yardage. And I think, people are sleeping on him. People are sleeping on this dude. I think he's going to really have an amazing year this year. I think with our offensive line, I think Jaylen Wright is going to take over that lead back role. And, it'll be a 1-2 punch with Devon Achane and him. But I think he's going to take over as the lead back and really, kind of solidify himself as, one of the top rushers. I think he's probably going to have maybe 800 to 1,000 yards this season. I can kind of put that on you. He's slept on. He's slept on. This dude has such crazy potential. Like I said, 5'10", 5'11", 210. He's very elusive and can break tackles, put his shoulder down, and he runs a 4.38. So he can, once he gets out in the open, he's just like Devon Achane. He's gone. He's going to be gone. And I think, again, a breakout player going into training camp, I think Jaylen Wright is going to be just like Devon Achane, back in the day. So, yeah, I think it's going to be nuts. The next one, familiar face, but, I don't think he's had a breakout yet. It's Jaylen Waddle. This is a player that I think a lot of people are sleeping on. And here's the thing. I think a lot of people want to pretend like they know stuff. We don't know what's going on in that locker room. We don't know what's going on a day-to-day basis. But this is why I think he is going to have a breakout year. It's going to be because Tyreek Hill wants out. You're clearly, if not this year, you're going to trade Tyreek Hill next year. And you don't need to be funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill all day long. You're not going to be doing that. So what is going to happen this year, if you look, right? If you look at this, Some of the games that Tyreek Hill is out, Jaylen Waddle just balls. That's the whole thing, you know. Tyreek Hill is out, Jaylen Waddle looks like a number one again. It's happened continually throughout his career where we'll face the Jets and it's like Tyreek Hill's out, Jaylen Waddle goes for 140 and a touchdown. This is the thing. Again, if the shoe fits, if the painting looks right, if you can kick the rock and it hits the stone, Tyreek Hill is a nuisance. He's completely a nuisance, and you can see it every offseason. And what I'm trying to see and what I'm trying to explain on why it's going to be a breakout year. Yeah, of course, he had, fantastic stats. What was it? Like the 3 years, with Tyreek Hill. I totally get it. But we forget that Jaylen Waddle looked like a number one in his rookie year. He looked fantastic. He looked like he was going to be the guy. And we forget that every time Tyreek Hill is out, he looks like a stud. Of course, this last game, it is what it is. But throughout the years, Tyreek Hill gets injured, and Jaylen Waddle looks like a number one again. Every single time. It never fails. It's never like, oh man, Tyreek Hill was out and, the Waddle did not step up. Every single time Tyreek Hill is down, Jaylen Waddle turns into a number one again. And what I'm going to tell you this year is Miami is not going to the past 3 years we've been funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill. You can see it, over and over again. We're funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill. He always consistently has decent yards. He had like 800 this year, but we're always funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill. Now, this is the year where Mike McDaniel's not going to be funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill. We're about to trade him. He's a nuisance on the team, and you want to see what you got. So now what we're going to be doing is, as you can see with the young movement, it's going to be a transition where we're going to start giving the ball to Waddle more and not Tyreek Hill. He's going to get the brunt of the catches. It's going to be probably targeted 10 times for Jaylen and maybe 5-6 for Tyreek Hill. It's going to be much more of like a distraction from the defense to get away from Jaylen Waddle from Tyreek Hill. That's what we're going to do this year. We're going to allow Jaylen Waddle to take that number one role because we paid him that money and because we're going to trade Tyreek Hill. We're going to trade Tyreek Hill possibly for a receiver in the draft this coming year. Maybe that could happen as well. But we're going to see what Jaylen Waddle can do as the number one guy. And I think, honestly, when you see some of these games where, against New England, this is against, I'm telling you right now, this is against Christian Gonzalez. I remember this game. Christian Gonzalez is highly touted as one of the best corners in the league. This is one of the things that people don't see with Waddle because it goes underlyingly, like under the rug, is that Tyreek Hill faces like Christian Waddle, Sauce Gardner, all of these guys, and he really can't get open. And then they go on Jaylen Waddle, and he has like 5 feet of separation. If you watch the highlights of Jaylen Waddle throughout the years, Tyreek would go against Sauce Gardner, and yes, Tyreek's very fast, but Sauce Gardner, Christian Gonzalez, all of these guys typically shut Tyreek down. Jaylen Waddle goes against him, and he's getting wide open. His routes are I'm telling you right now, I will give this stat. This is something I will put on my grave. Jaylen Waddle is a better route runner than Tyreek Hill, 100%. Tyreek Hill's just very fast, but route running wise, to get open and to get separation, Jaylen Waddle's a better route runner. It's been clear since the beginning of him being there, of Tyreek being there, is you see Tyreek Hill uses his speed, and yeah, he gets open, but when Jaylen Waddle faces the top corners, unfortunately, Tua doesn't look his way because he's funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill because that's what he's told to do. But if you watch Tyreek versus Sauce, Christian Gonzalez, who's another good corner, Denver's guy, whatever, Surtain. If you watch Tyreek Hill against them, the good corners kind of shut Tyreek Hill down, Stingley, and then they go against Waddle, and Waddle's getting open. He has separation. So I'm telling you right now, this year, Jaylen Waddle's going to break out. They're going to give the ball to Waddle now because we don't need to be funneling the ball to Tyreek anymore. This year, I don't think that they are trying to go for a Super Bowl. They're trying to do a mini rebuild to get tougher. And again, Tyreek Hill, we're going to trade him. This is something that's going to happen. And Jaylen Waddle, great blocking receiver. Like, if you watch Jaylen Waddle, his blocking is fantastic. I'm telling you, man, he's one of my favorite players on the team. And I remember I was so happy when we drafted him. But I think Tyreek Hill took away from his younger years, and I think we have a contract for him now, and I think they did that on purpose. And now that we're going to trade Tyreek Hill, I think it's his time to step up. And I think, a lot of people are going to sit there and go, oh, Jaylen Waddle, you saw him last year, blah, 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 blah. When you have a person coming to work every day and you have to deal with a headache every single day, also coming to work, coming in late, and then you put in all the work that you're doing, all the work that you have going for you, you put in all of this effort. This dude comes in late, is crying and whining every single day, completely is just a headache to everyone. And then you go into the game or the practice, and the primary targets are going to Tyreek Hill. Every first read is going to Tyreek Hill. You're going to get frustrated, and you're going to probably, tell me I'm wrong. Like, we've all been in sports before. I know if I'm sitting there putting all this work and I'm better than a person that's next to me, but yet the coach is just, giving the ball to the one guy that's, showing up late, doing all the dumb stuff, and I'm giving 100% every single day, I'm going to get frustrated, and I'm going to be like, all right, whatever, I'll just be the number 2 because you guys don't believe in me. That's probably what happened to Jaylen Waddle. He showed his rookie year that he could be the standard in Miami. And then we traded for Tyreek Hill, and he just became a number 2. And then slowly started dipping after that, where it was like, the first year was like 1,700. Then the next year was like 1,300. Or not 70. It was like 1,300. And then he had, the third year where he was, pretty good. But again, it was like Tyreek Hill was getting everything. It was basically like a 70 split, where it was like 50 more targets for Tyreek Hill in these last 2 years. And yeah, he looked good, 100%. But again, this year, snaps were completely different. And it's like, after 3 years of dealing with this dude, it's kind of like, all right, what do I want to do here? I know we got paid, but as an athlete, you don't, you care about getting paid, but you care about being the guy. That's what you were drafted for. You thought, round 1, pick 6, you're going to be the guy. You're going to be the dude that is the number 1. And you're with Tua. You thought it was going to be you and Tua. And we were going to grow like that. Then you got Tyreek Hill, and, you became, basically a Robin instead of being a Batman. And, of course, I appreciate Tyreek Hill for everything he's done. It's great. But I think this year, we're going to be transitioning to a younger movement, and I think that means that Jaylen Waddle, it's been 4 years in the league. You got the contract. It's going to be his time to be the number 1 dude. And then again, we might draft somebody in the draft. Another player that we're going to talk about is let's see if I can type his name right. Where is he? Right here. This guy. They don't show his stats for last year. How do I get to that? He had stats this year. What's going on? Okay, they're glitching right now. Well, we won't show his stats, but whatever. Jaelan Phillips. It's just been an unfortunate couple of years. Why is it not showing his stats? This is crazy. All right, well, they're not going to show his stats. PFF, sometimes, whatever. Jaelan Phillips is another guy that I think, will make this one quick. But, he's just been in an unfortunate situation every single year, where this last year, instead of signing a decent safety, we signed Jordan Poyer. He ended up being atrocious. And what ended up happening is, came back from Achilles. He looked fantastic. Jordan Poyer slams right into his knee and pops his ACL. That's essentially what happened this year. But every single year before he gets injured, Jaelan Phillips looks like he's going to break out and be a star. And I think this year is going to be the year that, we have a much better front 7. And it's going to lead to Jaelan Phillips being able to eat more. And I think this year, now that we've gotten rid of all the, dummies that we had on the team, we're going to have a much better year. Second year in the system. People are not going to be confused on where to be or anything. And this dude is going to eat. He's been eating since he was in the league. He's a fantastic player. And now that he has chop, again, I think Jaelan Phillips is going to be a very solid player. We have Bradley Chubb for another year. But I think this is the contract year for Jaelan Phillips. We'll probably pick up his 5th. How many years has he been in the league? 1, 2, 3, 4. We didn't pick up his, or is it his 5th? I don't remember. So we'll probably extend him if he plays well. But again, like I said, this dude is a stud. He's a stud. And every single year he's been eating, it's just something happens where the New York Jets stadium pops his Achilles, or then Jordan Poyer, we sign him from the freaking Bills, and he pops his ACL. And he comes back stronger than ever. And this year is going to be the year that he just does not get injured. We don't have all these crazy, confused players. And I think he's going to have a 10-sack season, and the defense front 7 is going to be much better. He's not going to have to take on 2 blockers every single time. It's going to be a breakout year for Jaelan Phillips. And I think, we are really going to be talking about him as one of the premier pass rushers this year. I mean, they're not showing his stats, but every time he's on the field, he's wrecking games. He did it, in the Jaguars game, the first game of this season when he ended the game, Chargers game when he ended the game. Whenever we need a sack, Jaelan Phillips is there, and he does it. He does the thing that we need him to do every single time we have him on the field. And I'm telling you, he's going to have a breakout year. And yeah, those are going to be the guys that I think. And the last one is Cam Smith. Wow, this PFF thing is terrible. They don't want to show anything. Cam Smith, people forget, again, second round, basically mid-second round. This is supposed to be the guy that steps up. And I understand that some people are down on him. I get it. Totally get it. He's a young kid. He's 22 or something like that. Young kid. He's, a little immature. I totally get that. But this is the year where, you can either keep playing football or you're going to be a backup somewhere. And nobody wants to get in the NFL. That's why. Defense. Whoops. So, yeah, of course, he hasn't had the greatest years. But, when you look at him, tackling, run defense, great. Coverage was not great. But corners need time to play, and I think with the players that we had Jalen Ramsey, we had Kendall Fuller, you kind of were grooming him to this point. But corners need time to play. And I think what's going to happen this offseason is we're going to probably trade for a corner. Like I said in the last video, probably get like a Greg Newsome or something like that. And we're going to see what Cam Smith does in the offseason. Might sign an extra free agent. But we're going to see what Cam Smith has. We're going to let him start. We're going to let him do his thing. And then if we need to get another corner, we need to get another corner. But we're going to see what Cam Smith has as a player this coming season. And I think, breakout may be a strong word, but I think we'll get a reliable starter from Cam Smith coming into this season. He's not going to be like a Jalen Ramsey or anything like that. Maybe it would be awesome. But I do think that Cam Smith could be that second corner. Maybe we need to draft another corner, or maybe we trade for one. But I think he will be a reliable 2 coming into this year. We're going to let him play, let him get his feet under him, let him get, if you watch some of the games that he played, against, Cardinals. Yes, he let up a couple things, But when you watch him go against anybody else besides Marvin Harrison, he looked pretty good. He didn't look bad. His tackling's good. He wraps up. He's a good tackling corner. He just needs to get that little extra anticipation. But when you saw him against, a couple of the secondary players, he looked all right. He didn't look, crazy bad. And I think, again, you need to see what you have in him this year. And, I could be wrong about this, but I do believe that we will get a reliable 2 out of Cam Smith. It's been the first couple of years they were grooming him and all of that. And then we had, Jalen Ramsey before we drafted him. And I think, with the whole Vic Fangio thing, it was a very confusing setup. This is going to be a year where you have, a defensive coach for him not different than the last one, because that's very confusing for a young player when you have a style of playbook, and then Anthony Weaver is a completely different style. Coming into this year, you're going to have Cam Smith, second year in the playbook, understanding things, understanding where he needs to be, who's switching, who's not. I think he's going to have a very, not, like I said, he's not going to have 9 interceptions and, be the greatest thing. He could. He's got a lot of the traits to do that. He's got hands. He runs a 4.4. He's 6'1". He's good at press. But again, I think he's going to get that extra step that he needs in this year to allow himself to be a reliable 2. And then a high ceiling, he'll be, our starting corner. But I think he will be a reliable 2 coming into this year. And then whoever we get as a trade or, whatever free agent we sign, I think will be the other guy across from him with Kader Kohu. But I think Cam Smith can be, get him right with Anthony Weaver. He'll be a reliable 2. Especially because, and the reason why I'm saying this is because the way that we've built this team right now, last year, the corners would need to have to stay with the receivers for like 5-6 seconds. This year, because we have much more of a pass rush, we have much more of a defensive interior, we have much more of a stout front 7, you're not going to need to stay with the receivers for that long. You're probably going to need to stay with them for 3-4 seconds instead of 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8. Like one of the catches Marvin Harrison had on him was taking himself from the left side of the field and running all the way across to the right, basically almost to the other sideline. That's like a 7-second play that he had to stay with him, and you're not going to need to do that this year. You're going to just need to stay on your guy for 3-4 seconds, and that'll be it. So I think he's going to have a decent year coming into this year. So yeah, as I can say, my 2 favorites coming into the season, well, actually all these guys are my favorite, but I can't wait to see what Jaylen Waddle does this season. I think, again, you're dealing with a headache all the time, and we're finally going to transition from funneling the ball to Tyreek Hill to it's going to Waddle. It's time for Tua Waddle connection to really take that next step. And of course, we're going to throw the ball to Tyreek. It'll be that way, but we're not going to go 130 targets for Tyreek and 70 for Waddle. It's going to be more of an even split where it'll be like 80 and 80. Or it might be more for Waddle, but I think he's going to take the role as the number 1 now, and Tyreek Hill's going to be the number 2. And most likely, we're going to plan in the sort of, you're not going to sit there and go into the offseason planning for Tyreek Hill to be here, and that's why Waddle's going to get the ball more, because you're going to plan for Tyreek Hill to just throw a temper tantrum and want to get traded, sit out, whatever the hell he's going to do. You're going to plan for that. So how you plan for that is Waddle's the number 1, Tyreek's 2, and if you want to throw a temper tantrum, then you trade him for whatever and somebody else takes the role. But Waddle's going to be the number 1. We're going to see what he has. Jaylen Wright. I think people sleeping on Jaylen Wright. I think Jaylen Wright is a super high potential running back, and I think he's going to take that real running back role, and Devon Achane will be, the scat back. We might even be in a 2-back set. That could possibly be a thing where Jaylen and Devon Achane are both on the field. And then, of course, Jaelan Phillips, we just need him to stay healthy. Once he stays healthy, he's going to be a stud. Like I said, Cam Smith. I think this is the year where, like I said, not sitting there going he's going to be a Jalen Ramsey or like a Darrell Revis. Not saying that. But a reliable 2 to whoever we get for a 1 That's what I think he will turn into this year. I think we're going to see what we have in the offseason. We're going to see how he plays, see how he comes into the offseason. Is he bigger? Is he faster? Is he more, fit? Is he, more in depth with the playbook? And see what he has. And if he doesn't have it, then yes, then we will figure out what we're doing. Maybe, put Cater. But I think this is the year that you see what Cam Smith can do. Like and subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this video. Love you all. Fins up, baby. Peace.